too much, never too much. Love, 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 to dance with my father.
Are you in a good place now in your life?
Depends on when you ask me whether or not it's a good place.
Are you happy?
It depends. It also depends on when you ask. Asking right now? No, not particularly.
It has been 19 years since Luther Vandross, the smooth voice behind so many hit songs, passed away. But now his family is finally speaking out about the rumors surrounding his death. What really happened to Luther? Were there secrets about his health that were kept from the public?
Did he struggle with the idea of coming out publicly? Was that something that you talked about at all?
We talked about it. It was basically he did not want his mother to be.
Did his family hide anything? Fans have been asking these questions for years, and the truth is coming out now. What do these new revelations mean for his legacy? Let's dive into what his family has recently confirmed about Luther Vandross.
My father's name was Luther, and there was an ad on the nightstand. Remember the ad for pasta that said, Ronzoni sono boni, Ronzoni is so good? She looked at the ad, she says, okay, Ronzoni. And that's how I got my name.
Luther Vandross was born in New York City in 1951. His family lived in Manhattan, where his dad sang and his mom worked as a nurse.
They all call me Ronnie. I was one of 4 children, myself, another brother, and 2 sisters. I was the youngest of these 4.
Luther loved music from a young age and taught himself to play the piano. But when Luther was just 8, his dad passed away because of diabetes. This was a very hard time for him. Luther wrote a song called Dance with My Father. This song was about the memories he had with his dad, and especially the fun times they had together. It was a very personal and emotional song for him.
Love, 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 to dance with my father.
When Luther was 9, his family moved to the Bronx. His sisters, Pat and Ann, played a big part in shaping his love for music. They took him to concerts to watch big stars like Dionne Warwick and Aretha Franklin. Luther finished high school in the Bronx in 1969. He even started a fan club for his favorite singer, Patti LaBelle, while still in school. He also performed with a group called Shades of Jade and got the chance to sing at the Apollo Theater, which was a big deal. Luther didn't go straight into music full-time after high school. He went to college for a while, but music was his true passion. Eventually, he left college to focus fully on his music career. In his early years, he performed at Apollo's famous amateur nights and was part of a theater workshop called Listen, My Brother. This workshop even took him to the Harlem Cultural Festival in 1969, and he got to perform on the show Sesame Street. Luther had worked with many famous singers. In 1972, he sang backup for Roberta Flack and Donny Hathaway, 2 big names in the music industry. He also worked with Dolores Hall on her album and showed off his amazing voice in songs like Who's Gonna Make It Easier for Me?
Hey now, yeah, it's for the best.
Luther wasn't just a background singer, though. He was part of a group called Luther in the 1970s. They made some great music, but their albums didn't sell as well as expected. Even though the group didn't make it big, Luther didn't give up. He continued working hard, doing voice work for commercials and backing up other famous artists like David Bowie and Chaka Khan. Finally, at the age of 30, Luther released his first solo album called Never Too Much. This album became a huge success, with the title song hitting the top of the R&B charts. From that moment on, Luther's career took off. He released hit songs like Forever, For Always, For Love, and Give Me the Reason in the 1980s, becoming a superstar. One of his biggest hits was Here and Now in 1989, which became a top 10 single and earned him a Grammy Award. He was known as the King of Love Songs, and his fans loved him for it. Luther kept winning awards and making great music throughout his career. He even did duets with big stars like Janet Jackson and Mariah Carey.
And now, I promise to...
Luther had just signed a young singer named Jimmy Salvemini. Jimmy had just finished recording his debut album, Roll It, and Vandross wanted to celebrate this moment with Jimmy and his brother Larry, who was Jimmy's manager. On January 12, 1986, the 3 of them were driving through the Hollywood Hills in Los Angeles. They were in Vandross's 1985 Mercedes-Benz convertible, with Luther behind the wheel. While driving on Laurel Canyon Boulevard, a narrow two-lane road, Vandross was speeding, going 50 miles per hour in a 35 miles per hour zone. Suddenly, the car veered across the road's double yellow line, meaning it crossed into the lane for oncoming traffic. The car crashed into a 1972 Mercury Marquis coming from the opposite direction. After this initial collision, Vandross's car spun around and hit another car, a 1979 Cadillac Seville, head-on. The crash was severe. Luther and the Salvemini brothers were immediately taken to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Larry Salvemini, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, tragically lost his life in the accident. Luther Vandross suffered serious injuries including 3 broken ribs, a broken hip, facial cuts, and bruises. Jimmy Salvemini, who was sitting in the back seat, also had cuts and bruises, but survived. This accident was a major turning point in Vandross's life. He faced serious legal trouble because of the crash. Authorities charged him with vehicular manslaughter due to Larry Salvemini's death. While there was no evidence that Vandross was under the influence of drugs or alcohol at the time of the crash, he was found guilty of reckless driving. His driver's license was suspended for a year as punishment. Vandross pleaded no contest to the reckless driving charge, which means he didn't admit guilt but didn't fight the charge either. At first, the Salvemini family supported Luther Vandross. They knew he didn't mean for the accident to happen, and they appreciated his care for Jimmy. However, over time, the family changed their stance. They eventually filed a lawsuit against Vandross for the wrongful death of Larry Salvemini. The case did not go to trial, though. Instead, Vandross agreed to settle with the Salvemini family, paying them about $630,000. Despite this heartbreaking event, Jimmy Salvemini's album Roll, it was released later that year. However, the joy of this achievement was deeply overshadowed by the tragedy that took Larry's life.
Are you in a good place now in your life?
Depends on when you ask me whether or not it's a good place.
Are you happy?
It depends. It also depends on when you ask. Asking right now? No, not particularly.
In April 2003, something happened that changed Luther Vandross's life forever. He had a very bad stroke while he was at home. This stroke was so severe that it put him in a coma for almost 2 months. During this time, Luther lost his ability to talk and move, and he had to use a wheelchair. But thanks to his strong will and the support of his mother, Luther began to recover little by little, even though it was a very tough journey. The most important part of his recovery was his mom, Mary Vandross. She never gave up on him. When he had his stroke, Luther had just released one of his most personal albums. His mother shared with the world that he was starting to show signs of improvement. She remembered one emotional moment when Luther started trying to speak again. He even turned his head towards her voice when she called out to him. This gave her hope that her son was still fighting to come back. Mary also talked about the day Luther had his stroke. He was found by his housekeeper in his Manhattan apartment on April 16, 2003. When he was discovered, Luther's first reaction was to call for his mother. He shouted, "Get my mama! Call my mama!" This showed just how close they were and how much he needed her in that moment of crisis. Luther's story is not only about his struggle, but also about his family's painful losses. Luther was the youngest and last surviving child of his mother, Mary. The Vandross family had already faced many heartaches. Luther's father died when he was just 7 years old due to diabetes. His brother Charles and his sisters Patricia and Anne also passed away because of health issues like diabetes and asthma. Losing so many family members weighed heavily on Mary's heart.
I'm spending most of my nights alone. I'm Marietta Vandross.
Mary shared how hard it was to lose so many of her children. She wondered why all this tragedy was happening to her, but she found strength in her faith and believed that her son, Luther, would pull through by the grace of God. Mary was incredibly dedicated to Luther's recovery. She traveled from her home in Philadelphia to New York City 3 times a week to be by his side. She visited him in the hospital where his room was filled with cards, banners, and music. Even though the doctors said no flowers could be in the room, she made sure that the space was filled with love and hope. She would hold his hand and speak softly to him, playing music from legends like Aretha Franklin and Dionne Warwick, as well as Luther's own songs. This was her way of comforting him, letting him know he was not alone. Despite the stroke, Luther's music career didn't stop. His album Dance with My Father, which he recorded before he got sick, became a huge success. It won him 4 Grammy Awards, including the prestigious Song of the Year.
Hello, everybody. I wish I could be with you there tonight. I want to thank everyone and for your love and support.
The album also became his first #1, one hit on the pop charts, and earned him 4 NAACP Image Awards. Even though Luther couldn't be there to accept the awards in person, his talent and spirit shined brightly through his music.
As a busy wife and mother, I could never imagine a quiet, generous home. But due to the devastating effects of diabetes, I'm spending most of my nights alone.
In December 1985, legendary singer Luther Vandross found himself in a tough situation. A British magazine claimed that his dramatic weight loss was due to AIDS. This was a false rumor, and Luther decided to stand up for himself by filing a libel lawsuit against the magazine. At the time, Luther had lost 85 pounds, which caught a lot of attention. People were curious about how he had slimmed down so quickly. Unfortunately, instead of celebrating his hard work, the magazine spread false information. Luther was deeply hurt by this because it wasn't true. The real reason for his weight loss had nothing to do with his health being in danger. He had simply been working on losing weight through dieting.
And I said, "Are you sick?" No, I just can't be seen right now. So I went by his home.
Luther had struggled with his weight for years. When he started his diet in May 1985, he weighed around 325 pounds, 147 kilograms. He wanted to improve his health and feel better about himself. Many people struggle with weight issues, and Luther was no different. But instead of being supported or congratulated for losing weight, he was attacked by this false story. At that time, AIDS was a very sensitive topic. The disease was not well understood, and there was a lot of fear and misinformation. Many celebrities, like Luther, found themselves caught up in rumors because of how little people knew about the illness. When the magazine suggested that his weight loss was due to AIDS, it not only harmed his reputation, but also spread unnecessary fear. Luther knew he couldn't let this rumor continue. Filing the libel suit was his way of defending himself. A libel suit is when someone sues another person or company for making false statements that harm their reputation. Luther wanted the magazine to take responsibility for their hurtful lies and set the record straight. In interviews, Luther often spoke about his weight loss journey. He explained that he had worked hard on changing his eating habits and following a healthier lifestyle. His weight loss had been a personal achievement, and it was unfair for anyone to take that away from him by spreading untrue stories.
Asking right now? No, not particularly. No, it's too much work that yields too little result from my assessment of it all.
Also behind the fame and success, there was something else going on in Luther's life that wasn't talked about much: his struggle with his sexuality. In the music business, many people had their suspicions about Luther, but he never spoke about it openly. People like writer Bruce Vilanch and journalist Michael Musto had their thoughts about Luther being gay. Bruce Vilanch once said that Luther was deep in the closet, meaning he didn't want anyone to know he was gay. Lenny Kravitz, a famous musician, also talked about how Luther felt very lonely. David, who was close to Luther, and he overheard Luther talking about how sad he was that he couldn't be himself. In his book, Kravitz shared that Luther would have long, late-night conversations with Leslie. During these talks, Luther would open up about feeling isolated, even though many women loved him. He said that when the women screamed for him at his concerts, he was actually more interested in their brothers. This made Luther feel even more alone because he couldn't share his true feelings with the world. One of Luther's closest friends, Patti LaBelle, knew the truth about him. She has spoken openly about Luther since his passing. Patti said that Luther didn't want to come out as gay because he didn't want to upset his mother. She also said that Luther didn't want to upset his female fans, who adored him. It was very hard for him to be honest about his sexuality. Patti LaBelle caused quite a stir when she revealed this secret on a live TV interview.
Did he struggle with the idea of coming out publicly? Was that something that you talked about at all?
We talked about it. It was basically he did not want his mother to be.
While appearing on Watch What Happens Live, with Andy Cohen, Patti confirmed that Luther was gay. She shared how he struggled with coming out during his life. Luther didn't want to hurt his mother, even though she might have already known the truth. He also didn't want to lose his fans' love. Patti's bombshell on Luther didn't sit well with millions of people, Wendy Williams included. The talk show host believes the soul singer should have remained mum on the subject since Luther chose not to share that information with the world. She also believes, as his best friend, that speaking on the matter was especially inappropriate. She should have said, "No comment. If he had asked me something like that, then it's okay for me to talk about it. I didn't know Luther Vandross. He wasn't my friend, but it's not okay to talk about it when it's your best friend. You know? It's like a violation," Wendy blasted LaBelle.
Gone for about 12 years now, okay? Luther never publicly came out of the closet, despite the rumors and the obviousness of it all.
Also, coming out as gay wasn't easy for anyone back then, and it was even harder for black men in the spotlight. In the 1980s, when Luther was at the peak of his career, homophobia was everywhere. People were judged harshly for being gay, and there was a lot of fear. It was even more difficult for black men, who were already facing issues like racism. The pressure to fit into society's expectations was heavy. Vandross was known as a sex symbol for many women. His smooth voice made him a star in the R&B world, but being open about his sexuality might have hurt his image and career. The sad part isn't just that Luther kept his sexuality private, but that society made him feel like he had no choice. In a 2001 interview with Vibe magazine, Luther addressed the rumors about his sexuality with humor. When asked about it, he joked, "Am I bi-coastal? Yeah, I have houses in Beverly Hills in New York." Even though he was joking, it was clear that he didn't want to talk openly about his private life. He also admitted in the same interview that being so private had taken a toll on him. "I know I'm paying a price for being so private, and I do wonder if it's worth it," he said. Luther never felt safe enough to come out, and he had good reasons. During that time, coming out as gay could end a career or lead to even worse consequences. Luther was a man who just wanted to be loved and accepted for who he was. Sadly, he never got to experience that freedom during his lifetime. In the same Vibe interview, Luther confessed that he had never been in love. "I'm still waiting," he said. He shared that every time he fell in love, it was never returned. This left him feeling lonely and unfulfilled. Luther even recalled his first heartbreak at 16 when he told someone how he felt and was simply told, "Thank you, but I'm not interested." It hurt him deeply, and that pain stayed with him throughout his life. Luther longed for love, just like anyone else. He wanted someone who genuinely cared about him, not just because of his fame or fortune. Unfortunately, that dream never came true for him. Maybe that's why he never got married or had children. Throughout his life, Luther kept his private life very secret. Close friends like Bruce Vilanch and Patti LaBelle have shared that he had a relationship with a man during the late 1980s and early 1990s, but the man's identity was never revealed. Luther carried a heavy burden. He lived in a time when being open about his sexuality, it's heartbreaking that he couldn't live his truth openly.
He was smooth, like cappuccino on a cold winter's night.
At the 2004 Grammy Awards, Vandross won the Song of the Year award for this very song, "Dance with My Father." Unfortunately, Luther couldn't accept the award in person. Instead, he appeared in a pre-taped video where he said, "When I say goodbye, it's never for long, because I believe in the power of love," and sang the last 6 words. His mother, Mary Vandross, accepted the award for him. Luther's last public appearance was on May 6, 2004, when he was on The Oprah Winfrey Show. Sadly, he passed away on July 1, 2005, at the age of 54 due to complications from a stroke. Luther's funeral took place on July 8, 2005, at Riverside Church in New York City. Many famous singers and friends spoke at his service, including Aretha Franklin, Patti LaBelle, and Stevie Wonder. They all shared stories and sang in honor of Luther, showing just how much he meant to the music world. He was laid to rest at the George Washington Memorial Park in Paramus, New Jersey. Luther was often called the Velvet Voice because of his smooth, rich singing style. He had a tenor vocal range and was recognized as one of the best singers of his generation. Critics even called him the Pavarotti of pop. His voice was not only powerful, but also full of emotion, which connected deeply with his listeners.
The music industry is mourning the loss of R&B singer and 7-time Grammy winner Luther Vandross this morning.
Many modern artists have said that Luther inspired them. Singers like John Legend, Usher, and Boys II, men all credit him for influencing their music. John Legend once said, "All of us making slow jams now were inspired by the slow jams Luther Vandross was making." This shows how Luther's music continues to affect new generations of artists. In 2008, Rolling Stone magazine named Luther #1, 54 on their list of the 100 greatest singers of all time. Mariah Carey, a big star in her own right, said that recording a duet with Luther was intimidating. In 2010, NPR included Luther in their list of the 50 greatest voices in recorded history, calling him the platinum standard for R&B song stylings. This recognition highlights how special his music was and still is. Many tributes have been made to celebrate Luther's life and music. In 1999, Whitney Houston performed So Amazing in his honor at the Soul Train Awards while he watched from the audience. Then in 2004, a smooth jazz tribute album called Forever for Always for Luther was released. This album included songs written by Luther and featured various smooth jazz artists who had worked with him before. On September 20th, 2005, another tribute album, So Amazing, an all-star tribute to Luther Vandross, was released. This album featured famous artists like Beyoncé, Aretha Franklin, and Usher, all performing Luther's beloved songs. Aretha won a Grammy for her cover of A House Is Not a Home, and Stevie Wonder and Beyoncé received a Grammy for their version of So Amazing. Even after his passing, Luther's legacy continues. On April 20th, 2021, Google honored his 70th birthday with a special animated doodle that played his song Never Too Much. His talent went beyond just singing. He wrote and produced many of his songs and worked with other famous artists like David Bowie, Aretha Franklin, and Diana Ross. In a touching statement, singer Porter highlighted Luther's skill, saying he is a musical virtuoso. He believed that Luther's talent came from hard work and practice, showing that he was not just a gifted singer, but also a leader in the music industry. Luther's music is not just for Black people, it is the soundtrack to America. His songs bring joy and comfort to many, and his spirit lives on through the music he created.